As I mentioned in the My Modular Journey series, I spent nearly 2 years on and off doing casual research into this thing called eurorack. And frankly, I was unimpressed with the tens of thousands of dollars people gleefully spent on racks filled with modules only to make these electronic bleeps and bloops and this krill music. When I first started wrapping my head around generative music is when I changed my search criteria from just eurorack to modular generative, and an entirely different set of results appeared. After a few more unimpressive discoveries, I was about to give up when YouTube suggested an ambient relaxation piece called Folding Space. I am not exaggerating when I say this 4-hour magical piece of generative heaven was the final tug for me. The very next day, I started putting together lists of what I needed to start my own journey. Using this patch, both the notes and listening to it dozens of times, I began to understand Modular enough that I decided to take on the ambitious task of documenting my modular journey and share it with the community. Folding Space is one of over 100 random, generative, or arranged soundscapes produced by a guy in the UK that goes by the moniker State Azure. And it is with my utmost respect and appreciation that today I attempt to unfold space. To reverse engineer the patch and try at least as best as I can to recreate this amazing learning experience. My first read through the patch notes was like trying to read ancient Aramaic, upside down, backwards, blindfolded while listening to Cannibal Corpse on 11. I had no idea what these modular synthesis terms meant, so I set out to learn. And using Folding Space and the patch notes was great for me because the notes gave enough information to get in the ballpark, but it also forced me to fill in the blanks around any details not spelled out, which honestly was a perfect way for me to learn, forcing me to dig deep, get creative, and make the patch my own, well, as much as a random generative piece can be. One of the most helpful things I got from these patch notes were the ideas on which modules I should research for inclusion into my own experience. If I wanted a sound to do this, then I needed that kind of module, or something similar in function. This is why many of the modules you do see in my rack coincide directly with the Folding Space patch specifically. It wasn't simply, well, this guy has a Batumi, so I need a Batumi. Every piece I own was excruciatingly researched, and if you know me personally, you know what I'm talking about. Dozens, if not hundreds, of videos and blogs and posts and reviews were repeatedly consumed before I would purchase anything for my case, including the case itself, which should have been a simple task, unless you're me. Before we begin, I want to go over a few lessons learned that were not spelled out in the patch notes. Things like detailed settings for each module along the path. The important ones were in the notes, like the random trigger settings, things like that. But some of the minor nuances had to be figured out, which is why I refer to this as a learning experience. By not detailing every single setting, I was forced to experiment and learn what each of these circuits does, which to me is the best way to learn. The only VCA in the patch that's really mentioned is Talon, aside from the built-in one in Plaits. But this is where the general knowledge of how Modular works comes in. I had no idea in the beginning, so my early attempts at this were pretty embarrassingly bad. In the end, I wound up using only one VCA for the bass and chords. And Veils is being used down here as an attenuator only. These are all things you pick up over time, but again, recreating this patch gave me a reason to learn these things, and for this I am grateful. Let's talk about the effects modules. I'm pretty sure State Azure has some amazing effects and processing going on, because that is truly his secret sauce. The amazing depth and fullness of his mixes, even via YouTube or streaming. The patch notes did not discuss what to do with sounds coming out of the filters or VCAs, so this was solely up to me, or you in this case. For me, I chose Monsoon because I use Monsoon for everything, and it is my default reverb tank for pretty much everything. I also use Pico DSP over here for another channel of reverb. 2HP Verb is, well, guess what? A reverb. I don't even know where it is. No, it's way over here. 2HP Verb. And then I have disting in the C3 tape delay mode, ping pong tape delay. And that seems to work pretty nicely for the sound that you're hearing. For the copy of requirements, you can use stack cables or buffered mults. I use both in my examples here. Either will suffice. I love mults, but it does end up with a little bit more spaghetti on the rack. However you choose to copy your signals, just keep in mind the differences between passive and buffered, because you don't want to lose any signal. The last thing I want to discuss is module jumpers, which is really specific to your own modules, what you own. I happen to have the Lubadh trigger gate and the skipper, because that's what was recommended in these patch notes, and they sounded cool, and they are in fact cool. I have a random trigger gate set to a 200 millisecond trigger, which even after when I'm playing with it right now is actually a little too long. I should have left them at 1 millisecond, but for now that's what we got. For skipper, I took off the jumper 1 for this one because I wanted regular random versus clustered pulses. But to me, I have it set to the factory default of triangle, but regardless, I'm only using the sine bank anyway, so it wouldn't matter what I had that set to. And as for my VCA, again, this is my specific VCA. I have it set to 4 independent channels, so no stereo jumpers going on here. It's all factory default stuff. I'm going to talk about the clocks now real quick. As the patch notes start out, Pamela's new workout. Here's the patch notes, by the way. I printed them out. So the very first thing in the patch notes, main clock from Pamela's new workout into Lubadh R110, which is what you see over here, for the random trigger gates, which are essential to this patch. And then 2 of the voices start out with going from skipper to plates or to ensemble through a number of routes. So I'm using 4 channels of Pamela's right now, 3 and 4, and then 7 and 8, just randomly chosen and configured. I'll talk about the individual configurations as I go through them in detail. I wanted to start this by showing what it looks like when it's done, and then how I got there, kind of like, again, reverse engineering, breaking it apart to see how it was put together. Now I'm actually going to pull everything out and then build each voice one at a time. So hang in here with me while I unpatch this beautiful. Oh man, this is going to suck. Oh man, this is gonna suck. All right, just do it. Just pull the wires. Here we go. You ready? I'm gonna leave that in, I guess. All right, we have our blank canvas. So first, let me talk about the modules that I picked up based on this patch or what I researched. So Pamela's new workout, of course, was an obvious choice. Random skipper, random trigger gate, and skipper were obvious. Those were some of the first few modules I bought last year. I could not find a Modbox or Ultra Random for months, and then they finally came in, so I have those two as well. So this is my random section here. And then I have LFOs like Oct and Batumi. The real big ticket item from this patch, of course, is right here, Sinfonion. This one I didn't plan to buy for a long time, and then one came available, and I jumped on it before it could disappear. But this is 100% State Azure's fault. Thank you, dude, because this is an amazing module. I absolutely love it. I do not have a Delta 5, so I do have an Ornament and Crime I'm using for an envelope generator. And I also don't have a Volt Freak, so I'm using one of the Cinnamons versus the stereo pair, so that's going to be a little bit different sound, but I have them going through a stereo reverb, so you almost don't really notice the difference. Patch notes also talk about ultra random analog, which I'm only using the out A and out B to do timbre and harmo here in Plaits, so that's pretty straightforward. But I think what's going on in the URA is how it just works as a module adds a lot of the character to the Plaits voice. So I'll be showing that off here shortly. Belgrade is also an acquisition because of this patch. Belgrade, Batumi, and Talon. I think I'm in love with Chaos Devices. I think these are my next favorite next to the mutable instrument stuff. So let's talk about the first voice. First voice is Mutable Instruments Plaits, and the patch notes call that the Plaits synth voice. There is a lot going on in this voice, from variable speed enveloping, the timbre, morph, harmo, and FM are being modulated. The output to Belgrade then has a volt per octave frequency modulation. FM span are all modulated. Then we head through a ping pong delay here in disting, and then finally into monsoon for a touch of reverb, and then we head out to the mixer. The envelope setup alone is mind-boggling, and that's all done inside this little Ornament and Crime here, which is really impressing me a lot to where I may actually want to get another one of these guys too. It's so powerful. It does so much stuff. So let's refer to our patch notes here again. Where they start is Plaits. The Plaits voice starts with Trig 1. Trig 1 goes to Lattice Skipper at around 60%, which is also being CV modulated from Modbox with a very slow LFO. And I have it set to sine here. Trigger 1 then leaves Skipper, and it says it goes to the Sinfonion ARP clock input, which is also copied out to the Delta 5 trigger, which is in our case the Ornament and Crime. I'm going to go ahead and wire this up now. So our first cable is a little shorty. We're going to come out of Pamela's clock 4 into clock in of random trigger gate. If I turn on the clock, you can see the triggers and the gates firing away. From there, I'm going to take trigger 1. Again, this is for the Plaits voice. I'm going to take trigger 1 over here to gate 1 of the skipper 1. And then I'm going to modulate that from Modbox here. So what's going to happen now is when this is generating triggers, we're going to get a trigger here, and based on 60% of the probability with this random LFO happening here, we'll get varying outputs from the skipper. It's not too often, but it'll open and it'll allow sound to come through. So how that sound comes through is we are taking now an output from skipper 1 output, and I'm coming over here to my mult. It's a WMD mult, and so this means if I plug it in down here into 3, I have 3 possible outputs here. I'm going to split this here by taking one of them out down to the trigger of Ornament and Crime, and then the other one will come out here and go to the ARP clock of Sinfonion. So now this one open gate, when it opens, is now going to do these 2 different things. So that's pretty cool. from here, the ARP out now goes from here over to Plaits volt per octave. Okay. The ARP, you see the ARP is moving over here. The pattern, if you press the pattern button, let's get out of menu, press the pattern button until it gets to, the patch notes suggest random or Brownian. It could be either, or it could be anything you want, to be honest. But it could be Baroque. I'm choosing Brownian in this case. And then for the arpeggiator, I do the range about one octave and no semitones. And then this pitch, I have it going at around 9 o'clock here. So looking at the ornament and crime here, which is again my version of the Delta 5, if you look at, you can see the triggers are triggering the envelope. Inside the configuration of this, I have it set to an AD, so an attack decay envelope. Trigger 1 is triggering it. I don't know if you can see that text here. You could set these settings to anything you want, really. I'm using linear attack and decay is exponential and release is ledge. I don't think it really matters, whatever you want it to be. But the important one here is the decay. So CV1 down here will modulate the decay time of this envelope. And that is pretty amazing. Let me come back out here. So my attack and decay for the A is set to around 170. I believe the patch notes simply say slow attack and decay, so you can really kind of just play it by ear, whatever you want it to be. I found with Ornament and Crime, 170 attack is pretty good, and 170 decay has been working out pretty good. Hold on here, let me read the patch notes. So according to the patch notes, it says, again, the Delta 5 envelope generator, slow attack and decay with decay modulated gently via one of Oct's outputs. So that's pretty important here. So let's talk about that real quick. I'm going to take one of Oct's outputs. I'm going to take like number 5 here because I want it to not be super fast. I'm going to plug that down here into the CV jack. So now you can see right away the decay side of this is modulating, right? Let me speed this up. You can see that, right? So what that does is now every time this LFO sweeps, it changes the decay. So now random notes that are coming in all decay differently based on this LFO. So I thought that was pretty fascinating. How you do that in Ornament and Crime, of course, is you come down to channel A, you come down to where it says CV1, and you can change this from attack to decay to sustain, release. It's got a whole bunch of settings, but this patch calls for decay, and that's it. That's how I'm getting a varying decay. And now this, of course, the envelope out comes over here to the Plaits level. So here's one thing in the patch notes I think might be wrong. Forgive my insolence if I am wrong, but this says this envelope controls Plaits output via the built-in to VCA in Delta 5. Now Delta 5 may have a built-in VCA, but I don't in here. So I'm going to rely on the built-in VCA in Plaits to actually handle that through the level jack here. And now I've already wired up the Sinfonion ARP volt per octave out goes into Plaits, and the ARP is set. Now we're going to modulate the timbre, harm, and morph. So here is A out to timbre, and B out to harmonics. That's the simple jump there, and that's it. That's all that ultra random analog is doing. I'm going to take one more channel of Oct. Right now I'll just pick any speed I want, and I'll adjust it later. So Oct down to morph. And I'm just setting these a little bit like 10 o'clock to 2 o'clock, and then the same opposite, 2 o'clock and 10 o'clock for the attenuators, just to hear some kind of changes that happen in the sound. So lastly, I'm going to take a sine out of Batumi, and I'm going to modulate this FM here in Plaits. You see my color scheme going on here? So now this fast LFO is going to apply a little vibrato to Plaits because this FM is turned at like just a little bit below center to give it just a little bit of wiggle. All right, so now the fun part. We're gonna get towards the sound. So I'm taking Plaits out, not Augs, but just out to the input of Belgrade. And then the volt per octave here in Belgrade gets the second channel from Ornament and Crime, and we'll talk about that one in a moment as well. I'm going to get my stack cable because I'm going to need a stack here. But this, I'm just going to jump straight over to volt per octave. And then this other half of this stack cable comes up here to oct, and I have the attenuator set at probably around 3 o'clock or so. And this is now going to cause oct to speed up and slow down or reshuffle all of its LFOs based on the envelope that's triggering here. And that envelope looks like this. And again, I have it set once again to do on the attack side, I want this same LFO from. This is where it gets really interesting. So I'm taking a specific speed LFO out of oct to modulate an envelope that is then changing the speed of oct, which then changes the speed of what's being modulated. So what you wind up seeing on the screen here, if you can see that, is as it triggers, it speeds up oct, and then this envelope actually starts shuddering back and forth really fast, causing kind of that spattering effect you hear in Plaits. So see how it just quickly jumped? It actually has a really cool sound effect. That was again, I keep referring to that as genius. It may be common sense to you experts, but to me that was amazing. An amazing discovery. Let me turn this up to at least 4 o'clock here, maybe. It maybe needs to be a little faster. So now that same second envelope is not only modifying oct's speed, but it's also doing the frequency of Belgrade. So now between these two things, changing their time, you're getting a pretty interesting effect. And this second envelope here, the B1, I have it set to 127 decay, 127 attack, because on Ornament and Crime, there isn't percentages. These go up to 255, so 127 is half-ish, close enough. So Belgrade is also set to the 6th filter. The notes again say FM on, but I think it means SM. So we have cross modulation and self modulation. I don't know if he means this one here in the center, the Tito. I don't know if that's what that means, but I'm leaving it up in self modulation because that sounds pretty cool. 60% resonance, and then span on this side is modulated by a slow LFO from oct. And then FM over here is modulated by a fast LFO from oct. So let's wire those up. So the fast one is the fastest one on oct is the top. So I'll plug that into FM, and now you can already see the lights going. And then I'm going to take a slow one, not too slow, but. And so now span will be modulated as well. And span is this up here. So I've been leaving everything kind of at the center, because there's no settings in the patch notes. That's it for the Plaits voice, except for coming out of Belgrade to our effects. So let's do that. Going to come out of Belgrade into the X jack of disting. I'm going to come out of disting left and right. I'm going to jump right over here to right next door to Monsoon. And then I take Monsoon out over here to the mixer. I turn everything down. One more thing I want to add real quick is a clock source from Pamela's, because I'm using Disting as a effects unit, and it wants a clock for the Y jack. So now I have a full voice. Let's turn this up and see what it sounds like. So if you pull out the level line here, it'll open the VCA. So then you can tune or adjust. This is how you can actually tune this voice to be how you want it to sound. There's that vibrato. A little too much. Then you plug level back in and it's back being controlled by the envelope generator here. So what I want to do is I'm going to take this this CV here out and make it a little faster one, because I want to play with this. I want to play with this modulating envelope attack. So now this is our sound attack here. Remember, this is when I did 170 and 170, so it's slow. Now if you watch when a note triggers, it will then trigger this dynamic envelope, which will change the decay side. So after listening to Folding Space for hours, I'm noticing that the Plaits sound in that patch doesn't always have that warbling in it, so I'm not sure how to get that to be a little bit less random, except to maybe either lengthen the attacks so they don't happen unless it's a long held note. But another thing I had done earlier is I actually took this, let me pull this out, and I put it into Veils, and then I came out of Veils to here. So what that does is it gives me a chance to attenuate how much of that voltage from this LFO can come through. So now I can control that a little bit more. Let me get this one out of the way. So you see how now it's not doing very much, but if I jack it up all the way, you can see it really breathing with every LFO sweep. So you hear now how it's attacking and holding the solid note, and then at the very end it flutters. All right, so moving along to the second voice. The second voice is called the Vangelis lead, and it's done by the 4MS Ensemble oscillator. So let's start over here again with its triggers. So now we have gate 1 out of the random trigger goes over here to skipper 2 input. And then take a second LFO out of Modbox, also out of this slow LFO, comes to the CV. And then this is set to around 50%, so a little bit lower than that. Now the output from skipper 2, we're going to copy it. We're going to copy it one time. So I'm going to take a short stack cable. So I'm coming out of skipper 2 and I'm jumping it down here to marbles, which I will talk about in just a moment. And then the copy is going to come out of there to Quadigy's gate 1. So now when skipper 2 triggers, it's going to open the envelope, the normal envelope of Quadigy, and start sending out those envelopes in a moment. The reason I'm copying this is because the patch notes say it's copy trig 1 to random step and again copy to time warp. So I do not have a random step or a time warp. So instead, for randomness, I'm using marbles. And once there's a clock plugged into marbles, you have to use this the rate knob for a multiplier. And I'm just jacking it up all the way so we wind up getting a lot of notes. Quadigy envelope 1 then goes to Talon linear input. And this is again on a slow attack. You can see here there's a slow attack and decay. Input into Talon comes from channel B of Ensemble. And the settings we have for Ensemble are pretty simple. Everything is down all the way, with the exception of balance at 70%, and of course tuning. And then you can set your root note to wherever you want, wherever you're comfortable. But the twist knob is turned all the way down because twist actually gets modulated from Quadigy. And that second envelope looks pretty similar. It's a slow attack, slow decay, and I put a long release on it. All right, to finish the signal path, I'm going to take Talon out to Pico DSP in. Pico DSP again is in reverb mode, simple reverb. I'm taking then a stereo pair out to channel 2 of my ST Mix. All right, so the last thing to really talk about is the random step replacement, which is marbles over here. I'm going to come out of X2 here on marbles, and I'm just going to come over here to channel 3 in. So what's happening now is when skipper opens, it sends a signal to open the gate, but it also sends a second signal down here to trigger the clock in marbles, which then runs at a high speed and generates an X2 pitches. Steps is turned slightly below center, like maybe around 11 o'clock, because that's the slew side of marbles. I have both biases set up 12 o'clock. I have the deja vu set to 3 o'clock, so it generates randoms. 9 o'clock, and then the spread step set to 3 o'clock. And again, these, if you have marbles, if you're using marbles, you just experiment with it. Let's see what this sounds like. We turn off the first voice real quick. Turn up the second voice. Oh, wait, I forgot. I forgot a wire. All right, so we're going to take out of channel 3 to the pitches here of Ensemble. So what's going to happen now is, again, marbles is going to shoot off some voltages or some pitches into Sinfonion, who's going to quantize them, and then this out goes to change pitches in Ensemble. Oh, you know what I just thought? I just remembered. I cannot use the slew side of marbles here because I'm sending in the slewed voltage, which is going to get quantized. So that's interesting. That's not going to work. So all that means is that my version of this patch does not have swoopy Vangelis leads. Like there's not going to be portamentos in my patch because I don't have a device that does that. But that's what it sounds like. So now you hear the two voices talking to each other. The Plaits voice is a little bit more warbly, whereas the Ensemble voice is beautiful, brassy swells. Take out some of the echo and then turn up some of the reverb here. All right, so moving along, let's look at the chainsaw bass patch. The first thing we're going to do for the bass line is we're going to take it out from channel 1 Sinfonion up here to chainsaw. And chainsaw. Let me turn those guys off for a moment so we can speak. We can get some privacy. I'm going to take a chainsaw left over here to cinnamon. And then I'm going to take one more low pass. I'm going to take a low pass out to my VCA. And then my last route is going to be from the VCA to 2 HP verb. And then 2 HP verb stereo outs at the bottom are going to go down to channel 3 of my mixer. So the setup here is a very simple one. Channel 1 of Sinfonion is only a bass tone, and it is the bass tone of whatever chord is being played. In this case, A. In this case, E. There's only one note, one tone picked here, because that's all you're doing is playing a bass note. So if I turn up channel 3. So this is now our bass tone. Sorry, I keep itching my nose. This is now our bass tone. Let me kill some of the reverb here so you can hear it nice and clean. And then if we change the channel of Sinfonion, okay, that's simple. I'm going to do the same thing for the chords channel of Sinfonion. I'm going to take a 1 and 3 according to the patch notes. I'm going to plug them into the volt per octave 1 and volt per octave 2, so that way we have 2 notes coming out of Sinfonion into the second chainsaw, which then jumps over to the second filter, which then comes out of the low pass again into the second channel of the VCA, which now sounds like this. Now the patch notes do talk about taking the second chainsaw into 2 cinnamons, but again, I don't have a filter to use for the bass, since the only other filter I have is this down here, and disting's being used as an effect. This is going to have to work, and it sounds good enough. Again, you have to modify these things to work with what you have. So a little bit more we want to do to these voices here. We want to modulate the two filters. Going back to the bass paragraph here, we want to get a channel 4 out of quadigy. So I'm going to take a channel 4 out of quadigy, that's an envelope, for the bass. So I'm going to plug it into the CV jack of this filter. And then I need to take a clock from Pamela, which is very slow divided. And this is where it says to put it into another skipper, but I don't, at the time of putting this together, I didn't have another skipper. So instead I'm using an R skip in the channel itself here, and I'm using channel 7 of Pamela's for that. So that wire needs to come from 7 to gate 4. Then I'm going to turn on the clock. So now you've already heard it open and close with a very slow attack and decay envelope on channel 4 of Quadigy, getting a trigger from Pamela's and opening this. So the last cutoff modulation is going to come from Batumi, but I'm going to run it backwards to Vales again because I want to attenuate it. So I'm going to take channel 1 to channel 1 of Vales. Then I'm going to come out of channel 1 Vales, back up to Cinnamon 2's CV. So I'm going to raise the speed of this just so we can see what's going on. I'm going to now apply a little bit of voltage. So you can hear how big, like if I let all the voltage through, it sounded like this. And that's too distracting. So I'm going to attenuate it by lowering the voltage all the way down to give it just a little bit. So you hear how it's rising just a little. And now we'll slow it back down to the very slow, like just above the bottom. This is supposed to be super slow. And I think that's it for all of our voices. The only remaining things to do now is taking my last clock out of Pamela's over to the in-1 jack of Sinfonion over here. And the reason for that is, let me turn the clock off real quick. The reason for that is we need to nudge the program, like what it's set to. We need to nudge the pattern from A to E. And we need to do so very slowly and very randomly. So channel 8 over here is set to a divided by 48 speed and an R skip of 85% or something really slow like that. And of course, again, you could adjust that to taste. So I'm going to kick the clock on right now, and you should hear all the voices and the chords changing. So for the last two pieces of the patch notes, down here at the bottom it talks about this Sinfonion key change. Again, it's only E7 and A major. The in-1 jack is set to advance through these steps via trig, which is what we just hooked up. And you set that again in menu here, and you scroll over until you see in-1. And then you do the beats buttons here back and forth until you get to seek step forward. And that's what's telling this to move Sinfonion forward. And again, the patch notes say to use the second channel of the second skipper for this, but I'm just using a slow clock in Pamela's for this. And the very last item on the patch notes is looper. Now, looper is also another thing that did come from the patch notes here, because I'm going to admit something super embarrassing to you, and feel free to laugh all you want. But the first time I saw Folding Space for 4 hours that it was running, I thought that these were just a pair of eyeglasses sitting on State Azure's rack, like John Lennon's. I thought he was just being cool. I didn't even notice there were lights spinning around because they were moving so slow. I sent a screenshot of the rack to my brother because I was like, look at this is where I want to go someday. And even my brother said, number 5 is alive. So anyway, that's our embarrassing story about Looper. But it says the Looper plays back an improvised recording from the wave state. Of course, naturally, I don't have a wave state, but I do have the System 8 here. So I used the System 8. I customized a little patch of some spacey noises. I then found a traffic noise and a storm, weather noise on the internet, and just laid those 3 tracks together and mixed them together and dumped them into Looper, and that's what I'm about to show you. And that sounds a little bit something like this. I'm going to normally keep that pretty low, but listen to what this sounds like without that background noise. It sounds a little empty, right? I mean, sure, there's some reverb in there, but then listen to it with this backing track from Looper. Just a little bit. Pretty amazing. It's like that little bit of background sound is like the glue that holds it all together. So I guess the very last thing to talk about is just some of the configuration of, some more configuration of Sinfonion. Really just pick the notes that you want the arpeggiator to play or that you want the channel 2 to play. So remember, this is Plaits, arpeggio is Plaits, and channel 3 is Ensemble. I just have them playing the same notes so they sound similar together. And again, Chords is just fifths, and then I have the fifths tuned in a way where they only sound like they're changing one note, so that way it's not too distracting. So at this point, you just adjust things until it sounds the way you want it to. Not like that. Hold on a moment. Let me raise this way up to a slow decay or slow attack. So that's it for my unfolding space. My inspiration not only to get into eurorack in the first place, but also one of the best resources for learning modular by trying to recreate this beautiful generative patch. And I'm just going to let this play out for a bit. If you stayed with me through the end, thank you for hanging out and watching one of my biggest learning experiences. I hope some of this helped demystify some of this stuff for others. I want to throw a shout out to State Azure for not only your amazing musical creations, but also your generosity in giving back to the community with things like patch notes or walkthroughs of how some of this magic is created. So thank you again for that. And we'll see you in the next patch from scratch.